Okay, recording in progress. Good morning, everybody. So let's go back just a bit. We're on Masechet Beitzah Daf Gimel. Let's just see quickly again from the bottom of Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Won't go through everything we've done, just to get our minds back into it. So we know we've seen in the Mishnah Beitzah, Shnoda B'Yom Tov, Machloket Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, 4 different explanations for our Mishnah. Rav Nachman, this is Tanagolet Hamidet le Achila. And then we are dealing with, sorry, Legadel Beitzim, and then we're dealing with Muktzeh. Rabbi, who says it's all based on Beitzah Shnoda on Yom Tov, which was on after Shabbat, and it's a din of Hachana. And then Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchak could each talk about a different type of Gzeira, either Gzeira of Perot HaNoshrim or Gzeira of Mashkin Shezavu. Okay, and then we saw, the Gemara told us that Rabbi Yochanan holds like the last opinion. Rabbi Yochanan agrees as well that this is all to do with the Gzeira of Mashkin Shezavu. We saw about just past halfway down on Amud Aleph that Rabbi Yochanan brought the stira, right? It says the Rabbi Yochanan Rami, the Rabbi Yudah, Umeshani. Rabbi Yochanan brought this contradiction in the words of Rabbi Yehuda, and he resolved it. In Agavorcha, we have this whole discussion about the stira, but really the point here was to prove that Rabbi Yochanan also holds that it's that the Isur of the Beitzah is because of Mashkin Shezavu. And how does he prove it? It says Tanan in one Mishnah, "En sochtin et perot lotzim men mashkin v'im yatzu me'atzman asurin." Rabbi Yehuda omer im lo'ochlin hayotze men mutar v'im le'mashkin hayotze men asur. So again, we said if you cannot squeeze fruits to get the juice from them on Shabbat or on Yom Tov, and if the juice came out by itself, that will also be forbidden. That is the Gzera of Mashkin Shezavu. Rabbi Yehuda said, "Im lo'ochlin hayotze men mutar, v'im le'mashkin hayotze men asur." Rabbi Yehuda said, if it was for these fruits were for food anyway, not to make juice, but they were there for food, so the juice that comes out by itself is also considered food. So that is Rabbi Yehuda telling us that it's uchla de'efrat. It says Alma. Right, we are, for those who joined late, we're about 6 lines up from the bottom of Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. He says, Alma kol uchlin Rabbi Yehuda uchla de'ifratu. And therefore we assume from that Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda holds you have food that separates from food. It's not going to be muktzah. V'raminu, and said Rabbi Yochanan, now here's the contradiction. Ve'od amar Rabbi Yehuda in a different Mishnah, matne adam al kalkala shel perot b'yom tov lishon. You have a basket of fruits which is tevel, and you forgot to separate Trumot and Masrot, so you separate on the day of Rosh Hashanah, but you make a t'nai. You say, I'm separating on the first day, in case the first day is chol, and then I can eat it on the second day. And if the first day is Kodesh, well, I'm making the t'nai that I'll separate it on the second day. So miman avshach, you can eat the fruit on the second day, but not on the first day. And then he says, "V'chein beitzah shnoda b'rishon te'achel b'sheni." So too, an egg which is laid on the first day of Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, can be eaten on the second day, specifically on the second day, not the other way around. B'sheni in, b'rishon lo. So again, so the stira is, if you Rabbi Yehuda hold that any food which comes from food is uchla de'efrat, so then the beitzah should be allowed on the first day as well. Since it's not, we see from there a contradiction in terms. And Rabbi Yochanan answered, I'm just going through it quickly because we've already seen it, but he says, Mashani Rabbi Yochanan muchlefet hashita, right? Second last line of the page. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, in the first Mishnah with Rabbi Yehuda, you have to change around the order. So it's actually Tanakama who's the one who says that if the fruits were for fruit, then it would be mutar. But Rabbi Yehuda would hold always, in fact, that the food that comes out, the juice that comes out of the fruit would be forbidden. And that is Mashkin Shezavu. And in the same way, he holds that the egg which is laid on the first day of Yom Tov, on that day, it's forbidden. So what we see from there is that Rabbi Yochanan agrees that all of this is to do with the Gzeira of Mashkin Shezavu, because of the contradiction that he asked. So Rabbi Yochanan solved the contradiction by switching around the opinion. That was one answer. It just says that the Amud concludes, it says, since you compare these two cases to each other, the one of squeezing fruit and the one of laying the egg, you understand that it's the same reason behind them. We understand that it is the same time according to Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, continue on Amud Bet. We said that was resolution number 1 to the stira. Resolution number 2, Ravina Amar Leolam Lo Teipuch, says don't switch around the opinions of the Mishnah. Simply say Rabbi Yehuda Ledivreihem D'Rabbanan K'amar Lahu. Rabbi Yehuda was saying to Rabbanan L'shitatam. He was saying Ledidi Afilu Bolishonami. According to me, according to our initial understanding, says Rabbi Yehuda, according to my understanding, there is Uchla de Efrat, so you'd be allowed to eat the egg even on the first day of Yom Tov. But for you, but for you, you should at least admit that on the second day you'll be allowed to eat the egg. Why? Because it is two separate. We're talking about the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, that we view them just like we would view 2 days of Yom Tov Sheni, Shogaliot, as two separate Kedushot. And answers back, Rabbanan, Vamile Rabbanan, Lo, Kedusha Achati. Rabbanan say no, in fact it is one Kedushan, as we explained. This is how we relate L'chumra. This is how we relate to Rosh Hashanah, specifically both days as one long Kedusha, as one Yom Ha'arichta. Okay, 5th line on Daf Gimel Amud Bet, or 6th line. Answer number 3, Ravina Breder of Ula Amar, Hacha b'tarnagolet ha'omedet legadel beitzim, v'Rabbi Yehuda letamei de'it le'muktzeh. So Ravina Breder of Ula gives the third answer. He says, no, over there, in that Mishnah where you're talking about the egg which is laid on Yom Tov, you thought until now you were talking about, like the last 3 opinions of our Mishnah, that it's dealing with a tarnagolet, a chicken which is designated for food, and therefore it's uchla de efrat. But he says, in fact, there you're dealing with a chicken which was designated for laying eggs, and therefore the chicken itself is never considered food, and therefore it's going to be muktzeh. Okay, so Adkan, so that is the stira. Again, Adkan, we've seen the 4 different opinions, and as we mentioned, according to it was only the opinion of Rabbi, really, who said that our Mishnah is a din d'oraita. Certainly, the last 2 opinions of Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchak, who spoke about it being a gzera, either because of mashkin shazav or pelot shlim. If it's a gzera is by definition a din d'Rabbanan. So here comes the challenge. It says meitive. We now have a challenge on our explanation of the Mishnah. Echad beitzah shnoda b'Shabbat, ve'echad beitzah shnoda b'Yom Tov. So if you have an egg which is laid either on Shabbat or on Yom Tov, ein metaltelin ota lo lachasot ba et hakli ve'lo lismoch ba kilei hamita, aval kofea alea et hakli b'shvil shelo tishaveh. Okay, so in the days of the Gemara, they had far less, they didn't have all the tools and things that we have nowadays. They had to be a lot more resourceful about things. So an egg had a number of purposes. So it says, if the egg was laid on Shabbat or Yom Tov, the implication here is that it's going to be muktzah. And therefore, you could not carry it for its own sake. So you could use an egg, theoretically, to cover up a kli, to use it as a stopper. Rashi says over here, you have some sort of a flask. So you imagine you put the egg on top and that closes it up. Again, there you're carrying the egg for its own sake, so you can't do that. Or you have a bed or maybe a table which is a little bit wobbly, and you use the egg, you put it underneath one of the legs. Don't know what you're doing so that it doesn't the whole thing doesn't come crashing down. But Rashi says, if you place it in a certain way, you place it upright, then it's not going to crack. And somechba, then the weight it's actually going to support the bed. Okay, don't try this at home. But either way, you can't do that on Shabbat or Yom Tov with the egg because it's muktzah. But if you want to, since you can't move the egg, but you want to put a kli on top of the egg so that nobody will step on it, so that it won't break, and then after Shabbat or Yom Tov you can use it, that's okay. What's the chiddush there? The chiddush there seemingly is that you can carry something else for the sake of an object which is muktzah. The muktzah itself, certainly you can't carry. But can you carry something for its sake? That's a discussion of the Gemara on Shabbat, but according to this opinion, seemingly you can. Okay. But that's not our challenge. The challenge comes from the next part. It then says Sfeika Asura, Ve'im nit'ava be'elef kulan asurot. Okay, so what we're saying is this: an egg which is laid on Shabbat or Yom Tov will be muktzeh. If it's a safek, it's also going to be forbidden. What does it mean if it's a safek? So at this point, we understand that safek means it's a safek that it was laid on Shabbat or Yom Tov. You can't remember, right? You have the eggs. You have the eggs in the fridge. Sometimes you have the raw eggs and you have the hard-boiled eggs. They get put back in the same shelf, and you can't remember which is which. There, it's easy to figure out. But here, so this egg was placed wherever it was. You don't know if it was on Shabbat or Yom Tov. Okay, so it's a safek. So we're going to say that it's asur. And in addition, im nit'ava be'elef kulan asur. If it was mixed up with, even if it was mixed up, elef doesn't literally mean 1,000 necessarily, but it means it was just mixed up with many eggs, right? Far beyond the usual number of bittul that we require, but nonetheless, they are all going to be forbidden. Just in general, in terms of bittul. So there are different ratios of bittul for how much we need. Usually, we're all familiar with the concept of 60 to 1. 60 to 1 is where it comes to liquids. When I have liquid things being nullified, there are certain isurim which goes even where it's even more than that. So kilei kerem and ola and other examples. Sometimes we go up to 200, whatever it would be. Generally speaking, with solids, with yavesh, the ratio of bittul though is chad betray. So long as we have a simple majority, then it would be nullified. But here it's telling us in tava be'elef, no matter how many it is, there is no bittul, there is no nullification. Kulan asurot. So now the question is as follows. The Gemara's challenge is going to focus on the line that says Sfeika Asura. We say Safek, it's going to be Asur. Now that makes sense if I say that the Isur in the first place is Midoraita. But if the Isur in the first place is Midrabanan, so then a Safek, it's going to be a Gzera Ligzera. We say Safek Drabanan, we generally say we are lenient. So that doesn't seem to make sense. So the fact here that it says Sfeik Asura seems to be a proof that the Beitzah Shnoda B'Yom Tov is actually going to be forbidden Midoraita and not just from a Gzera. The other Gemara now spells it out. You're about a third of the way down the page. He says, Bishlama L'Rabba De'amar Mishum Achana Have Sfeika D'Oraita V'Kol Sfeika D'Oraita L'Chum. Right? According to Rabbi's interpretation of the Mishnah, who said this is all to do with Hachana, and then he said there wasn't a Isur D'Oraita, so you have to safek if it was laid on Shabbat or Yom Tov, so that's a safek D'Oraita. V'Kol Sfeika D'Oraita L'Chum. And anytime I have a doubt in a D'Oraita, then we're going to be stringent. Makes sense. Ela Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchak, the Amri Mishum Gzeira, Sfeika D'Rabanani, V'Kol Sfeika D'Rabanan L'Kula. If according to Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchak, we said like this, we say, if you know for sure that the egg was laid on Yom Tov, then it's only forbidden because of a Gzeira. So now if you're not sure that it was laid on Yom Tov, you're going to say what? You're going to say it's forbidden because maybe it was laid on Yom Tov. And if it was laid on Yom Tov, it's going to be forbidden because you might come to squeeze the fruits or to take the fruits of the tree. That's a Gzeira. The Gzeira, that's a Safek Drabanan, should be L'Kula. So that is seemingly a knockout proof that our Mishnah does not go like the opinion of Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchak. Okay, so says the Gemara, no proof. Why? Seifa atana safek treifa. It's talking about something different entirely. Right? When we say sfeik asura, what we mean to say is that if you have an egg which you don't know if it's a treifa or not. You think it might be maybe the right? If you have a tarnagolet, how would you know if the egg is a treifa? So if the tarnagolet which laid the egg was itself a treifa, then that would also be forbidden because we say yotzei ma tameh tameh or yotzei ma asur asur, and therefore you don't know that may be you have reason to believe that might be from a treifa, might not be. So then we say that egg is going to be forbidden. It makes sense in the language because notice we really changed the language. Originally we said. Right? Why did it say Sveika Asur? Maybe it could have said Sveika Mukta or something like that. But Sveika Asur means that you can't eat it. What does this have to do with the beginning part about an egg which is Mukta? Nothing. But because we're talking about eggs, we talk about eggs and we give a different halacha. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, "L'sfeik treifa." A couple of lines down from where we are, maybe in the Gemara. In Rashi, l'sfeik treifa. He says, "Safek nodam mitanagolet treifa." Again, you have a tanagolet treifa. You don't know which one, where the egg was laid. V'lav b'yom tov. This has nothing to do with Yom Tov. V'aidi da'ayli b'sul Beitzah. Since we're talking about forbidden types of eggs, ayli nami baha. Right? It's associative. That's why we mention it. Okay, and therefore that is the rejection of our proof against Rav Yosef and Rav Yitzchak. The only problem is, if I explain it to be talking about as fake treifa, then the seifa of the seifa doesn't make sense. Says the Gemara, Iachi eima seifa. So now let's say what comes next. Nit'ava be'elef kulan asulot. You said if it's mixed up, even with 1,000, if it is mixed far beyond the ordinary ratio of bittul, there is still no bittul, kulan asurot. It's still going to be forbidden. Why? If we're talking about the Yisur of Muktzah, and we're saying the egg is a safek because we're not sure it's a safek if it was laid on Yom Tov or was laid on Chol, I understand why there's no bittul. There's no bittul. Why? Because avei davar sheyesh lo matirin. This is what's called a davar sheyesh lo matirin, which means there's going to come a time when it's going to be permitted anyway. How's it going to be permitted anyway? Because after Shabbat or after Yom Tov. Generally speaking, the rationale of bittul is that something becomes asur. We say, why does bittul work? Bittul works because without bittul, it would always be forbidden. But if there's going to come a point where it's going to be mutar anyway, then there's no bittul. Then there's no bittul. And the idea here is that you could wait until after Yom Tov, and then it won't be muktzah. Therefore, there's no bittul. That is a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Lots and lots of discussion about what is a davar sheyesh lo matirin, what is not a davar sheyesh lo matirin. It's a very interesting discussion regarding Hilchot Pesach. Right? Is chametz considered, or maybe tarovet chametz, is that considered a davar sheyesh lo matirin? That's one of the reasons, according to some of the Rishonim, why we are so stringent with chametz and so stringent with a tarovet chametz on Pesach, because, again, under certain conditions, we know that midrabanan, you have a knas as well, but certain conditions of tarovet, and certainly midoraita, chametz, that after Pesach would be permitted. So therefore, you have the rationale to say that it's maybe a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Okay, that's discussion for Hilchot Pesach. We'll get there. But in terms of so if we say that it's an issue because the egg was perhaps laid on Yom Tov, it's a safek of muktzah. Therefore, it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin, and therefore there's no bittul. Right? Called davar sheyesh lo matirin, afilu be'elef lo batel. Something which is davar sheyesh lo matirin is never going to be batel. Elai amart safek treifa davar she'ein lo matirini utivatel baruba. If you say we're talking about a sfeik treifa, well, that is not a davar sheyesh lo matirin. A treifa is never going to be permitted, and therefore the only time it's going to be permitted is if it's nullified, if there is bittul, and therefore there should be bittul. In other words, we said that we wanted to say the sfeik asur is talking about a treifa, because that's the rejection of our proof, of our contradiction of Rav Yosef and Rav Yitzchak. But the difficulty is, if we explain it that way, we don't understand why there would be no bittul, no nullification. So says the Gemara, we said, Elei amat sfeik treifa davar she'eino matirin v'tivatel baruba, v'chiteima Beitzah chashuva v'lo batla. Okay, so here's another option. We're going to have to see if this works. It says, maybe you'll suggest the following. If you'll say that a Beitzah is chashuva, it is significant, and therefore there is no bittul. Right? We know we have a concept of certain foods or certain things which carry significance, and therefore there would never be batil. So if we think in terms of Isur v'heter, for example, sometimes you put something in, you put spices into a food, and we say that it's something which is there, which gives the food the taste. It's the valatama avid. Doesn't matter how much. That's not going to be batil. Or you have a davar ma'amid. It comes up very often in Chot Isur v'heter, something what's called a davar ma'amid, which is something which gives the food its substance. It gives it its shape. It wouldn't become the object that it is without the davar ma'amid, and therefore even if that's in a very small ratio, we say it's a davar chashuv, and it's not going to be batel. So would we consider an egg in and of itself something which is a significant object that is not going to be nullified? And here we have a big machloket Tanaim, and perhaps machloket Achronim as well. And we're going to see this idea of the egg being davar chashuv is only going to work according to one of them. So it says like this: if you're going to say that the egg is significant, it's davar chashuv, and therefore it's not batel, so that's only going to work according to one opinion. It says hanicha lamad amar kol shedar kol imanot shaninu ela lamad amar et shedar kol imanot shaninu ma'ika lameim. Okay, so this is a little bit confusing. The Gemara says like this: that's going to work. We have a Mishnah which we're going to quote right now, and in the Mishnah there is a sentence which says et shedar kol imanot or kol shedar kol imanot. We're going to have a machloket amaraim, how we should read the Mishnah. Now, what's the difference between that word et and that word kol? It's going to be all the difference, because what we're saying is like this. We're going to see, according to Rabbi Meir, there are certain objects. Again, the question is whether it's going to be batel is like this. If I go to the shuk and I want to buy something, so there are certain things we think of fruits or vegetables or grains or whatever it is. Certain things you go and you buy in quantity, and certain things you go and you buy by weight, right? And certain things you could go by both, right? I want to buy, let's say, a kilo of apples or cucumbers, whatever it is. Or do I go into the Rabbi and say I want 6 apples? Okay, so that's maybe an example of something you could go by weight, or you could go by quantity. The question is going to be regarding eggs. Does a person say, "Can I get a packet of eggs, or according to weight, or according to size?" And therefore, not each one is significant. Or does I say, "No, I want 18 eggs specifically, and therefore each one." If I'm counting each one specifically, that means that each one is significant. Each one is chashuv, and therefore it's not going to be batel. Now the question is, do I say that it's significant when I can count it by quantity, or do I, and therefore it won't be batel because I have that option, and that would be what we say kol shedar kol imanot, meaning anything that you might count. Since you might count it, we say each one is individually significant, and therefore it's not going to be batel. Or do I say no? The fact that you might count it is irrelevant. You might count it. You might go by quantity, but you might go by weight. Therefore, it's not as significant. Do I say if there's something which I purchase where I only count it, I don't go by weight, only when I count it, and that is et shedar kol imanot, then I say it's not going to be batel because I'll never go by weight. I'll always go by the quantity, and each one is significant, and that cannot be nullified. The question is, which category is the egg going to fall into? If the egg falls into the, or how do we judge it? If we judge it as et shedar kol imanot, sorry, let's just read the Gemara again. So it says like this. It says hanicha lamad amar kol shedar kol imanot. In other words, the understanding seems to be that an egg is something which you could purchase by weight, or you could purchase by quantity, by counting each one. So if I say that the Mishnah, which I'm going to see immediately, the Gemara is going to quote it. But if I say hanicha lamad amar, it makes sense to the one who reads in the Mishnah, kol shedar kol imanot, anything which could be counted, so fine. Then I'll say, according to that opinion, kol shedar kol imanot shaninu, I'll include the egg in that, and therefore it's not going to be batel. However, ela lemanda amar et shedar kol imanot shaninu, the one who reads in the Mishnah says et shedar kol imanot, only something which is exclusively going to be counted, right, by its quantity. Well, then ma'ika lameima. Then what can I say? Then the egg should in fact be batel. Let's just see Rashi over here. Right, so Rashi says, maybe a little bit before that, Rashi where he says afilu be'elef lo batil, he says afal gav de midoraita chad betray batil. It's something we mentioned. Even though midoraita, right, so long as you have a simple majority, 1 versus 2, for dry objects, that's going to be batil, that's going to be nullified. And by the way, these are halachot, these are masim shebechol yom, right? In the when you the chickens that are in the when they slaughter the chickens, the animals, and they check them, and you might have, and they're salted, etc. There might be one chicken there which is treif, so long as it's within a majority, that's going to be nullified. That's from the pasuk that says we go by the majority. We see that Rabbanan were stringent. For saying it's going to be permitted later time. Therefore, therefore you cannot eat it. It is not going to be nullified. So Rashi just tells us we're going to see who is this man damar, because we haven't yet quoted it. It's going to be later on. He says, Kol shedakol imanot shanin. B'mishnat ola kedil kaman. We're going to see in this Mishnah later on, well, right now, regarding orla, the lo batil, when we say that it's not nullified, mashma kol davar sheyesh b'nei adam ha'makpidim alav mipnei chashivoto lemochro b'minyan. So if we read the Mishnah saying kol shedakol imanot, meaning anything where you have people that are makbid to counter, to sell it or to buy it according to its precise number. So Beitzah nami abe mochrin oto b'minyan, with eggs, there are many who would sell it in this way. Ela lamadama et shedalko, but according to the other opinion that says et shedalko limanot, the mashma et means ameyuchad lekach, that which is can only be sold in this way. There's nobody who's going to sell it by weight or by an estimation or something like that. So there we're going to have a problem. So now the Gemara quotes the Mishnah. It says, Titnan, Mi shayulo chavilei tirtan shel kilei akelem yidalku, nitavu ba'achelot va'achelot ba'achelot kulan yidalku. Says if you have a certain type of grain, tiltan, it's a certain type of kitnit, certain type of grain, but it comes from kilei akerem. It was grown in such a way that it transgressed the laws of kilayim. So it says yidalku, they have to be burnt. You aren't allowed to. It's the issur of kilei akerem. You can't get any benefit from it. Nitavu ba'acherot v'achelot ba'acherot kulan yidalku. Even if it was mixed up with others, they also will see why there is no nullification for this at all. It has to be burnt. Divrei Rabbi Meir. And that is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Chachamim omrim yalu b'achatu matayim. Chachamim say no, there is going to be nullification for this in the ratio of 1 in 200. That's the ratio for kilei akerem. Again, we're more familiar usually with the idea of 60 to 1, but certain isurim are more stringent. Kilei akerem goes by 200 to 1. Okay, so there's machloket whether these chavilei tiltan, which are grown in kilei akerem, is there bittul or not? Chachamim say yes. Rabbi Meir says no. And now the Mishnah explains. Shaya Rabbi Meir omer et shedakol imanot mikadesh. In other words, Rabbi Meir is the one who says something you have, I guess these tiltan, or something which is significant. Et shedakol imanot, something which is a significant object that you would count it when you sell it. You're makbid on each individual quantity. Therefore, makadesh. Therefore, it becomes it's going to become forbidden. It's going to become significant, and it does not is not nullified in a mixture. That's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Chachamim are not as stringent as Rabbi Meir. Chachamim say no, there are only 6 specific items which would fit into this category. Rabbi Akiva Omer Shiva, and Rabbi Akiva says there are 7. Okay, but Rabbi Meir is the one who says anything which is significant, it's not going to be batel. And as you see there in the Mishnah, according to our version, it says et shedakol imanot. What we'll see, we'll pick this up tomorrow, is that Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish have an argument. How should the Mishnah be? Et shedakol imanot or kol shedakol imanot? As we've just explained, and that's going to be the nafkamina for the Beitzah as well. Okay. Adkan.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good day. Thank you very much.